Good evening from Beirut, where just a few hours ago, huge plumes of smoke could be seen rising through the city after a series of loud explosions. Israel says that it was targeting the headquarters of Hezbollah and its leader Hassan Nasrallah. But tonight, it's not clear whether he was in the buildings that were hit or whether he's alive or dead. The initial death toll from the explosion is that 2 people were killed, but that is expected to rise. We're told that 70 injuries have been reported so far. And just in the last hour, the IDF has issued warnings for people living in certain parts of those southern suburbs to evacuate their homes, which suggests that more strikes may be due overnight. Well, Iran, which backs Hezbollah, has called the attack on the capital in those southern suburbs of Dahir a dangerous, game-changing escalation. In just a moment, we'll speak to our international editor, Jeremy Bowen, who will give us the latest on what's happened and look ahead to what this could mean for escalating tensions in the region. But first, Hugo Bashega reports from the area close to the attack.
Scenes of war in Beirut. Hezbollah's conflict with Israel returning to its stronghold of Dahir, with a series of massive explosions and an escalation with unpredictable consequences. An attack so powerful that was seen and heard across the city. Lebanon now on the brink of another war. Chaos on the streets, and here is what they're running from. Dahir in southern Beirut, now looking like Gaza. But amid so much destruction, jubilation. 2 children rescued from the rubble alive. Hezbollah's backers, Iran, say this strike marks a dangerous, game-changing escalation in the conflict. For Israel, it's a strike targeting the heart of Hezbollah's operations.
Moments ago, the Israel Defense Forces carried out a precise strike on the central headquarters of the Hezbollah terror organization that served as the epicenter of Hezbollah's terror. Hezbollah's central headquarters was intentionally built under residential buildings in the heart of the Dahia in Beirut, as part of Hezbollah's strategy of using Lebanese people as human shields.
This was apparently the target, one of Israel's main enemies. Hezbollah's longtime and powerful leader, Hassan Nasrallah, seen here for the last time a week ago. Israel says it is still checking whether he was hit and remains alive. Hezbollah and Iran say reports he's dead are not true. This is one of the roads leading to Dahir. We tried to get out of the car, but we were stopped by a group of men. There is chaos, there is tension. We've seen crowds gathered by the road with rucksacks and bags, apparently trying to leave Dahir. Minutes before the attack, the Israeli Prime Minister finished a speech at the United Nations. Benjamin Netanyahu said his country wanted peace, but had no choice but to fight its enemies. Hours later, there was some response from Hezbollah in the way of dozens of rockets on northern Israel. One hit this building in the town of Sfat. For almost a year, there has been concern that something like this could spark a wider regional conflict. Tonight, there are 2 unanswered questions: whether Hassan Nasrallah is still alive, and if the Middle East will be engulfed by war. Hugo Bashega, BBC News, Beirut.
Well, the strike came as the sun was setting here in Beirut, and only just after an hour after Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave a defiant speech at the United Nations General Assembly in New York. He didn't refer to the ceasefire that had been talked about in recent days, instead saying Israel would continue to fight Hezbollah and telling world leaders we are winning. From New York, Tom Bateman reports.
The Israeli leader walked straight into the question all the diplomats here at the UN are asking.
Prime Minister Netanyahu, are you agreeing to a ceasefire deal or not?
And he wasn't answering it in the hall either. As he took to the stage, many delegates walked out.
Order, please.
But he was defiant and had a warning for Hezbollah's backers.
I have a message for the tyrants of Tehran. If you strike us, we will strike you. There is no place in Iran that the long arm of Israel cannot reach. And that's true of the entire Middle East.
Watching were some relatives of Israeli hostages held in Gaza. Mr. Netanyahu said only surrender by Hamas would stop Israel's offensive. He scolded Iran's role in the region.
It's a map of a curse.
And defying US pressure, made no mention of the call for a ceasefire in Lebanon, saying rocket fire had to stop.
Yet Israel has been tolerating this intolerable situation for nearly a year. Well, I've come here today to say enough is enough.
Palestine will be free.
And where Mr. Netanyahu goes, so does dissent against Israel's military offensives. Now, Lebanese flags join the Palestinian ones.
They accuse the US of keeping the weapons flowing to Israel, despite Mr. Netanyahu ignoring much of what America has wanted. First over Gaza, now they believe he's making a mockery of the US's calls for a truce in Lebanon.
After his speech, Mr. Netanyahu's office released this picture of him here in New York, giving the go-ahead for the strike on Beirut. The snub to his American ally, which wants restraint, could hardly be stronger.
And in the last few minutes, President Biden has said that the US had no advanced knowledge of the strike on Beirut, and he added he was concerned now about escalation. Meanwhile, here in New York, his top diplomat has said that the sides here have a choice between diplomacy or more conflict. The Americans are urging restraint and talks, but what is clear tonight is that their Israeli allies aren't listening.
Tom, in New York, thank you. Well, let's head straight to Jerusalem and our international editor, Jeremy Bowen. Jeremy, a significant target, a potential response. What is likely to happen next?
Well, first of all, as far as where things are at, you know, we talk a lot about the Middle East being on the brink. It feels tonight as if they're tumbling over the edge of it. As far as Israel's concerned, they seem to believe that they have inflicted so much damage now on Hezbollah that their boot is very much on the throat of that organization, and they would be very ill-advised, that they would be daft to take it off and to go for the kind of truce that the Americans have been pushing for. Israel's next big decision may well be about launching a ground offensive in southern Lebanon. For Hezbollah, now whether or not its leader Hassan Nasrallah is still alive, and we don't know, the decision is what to do with the rest of its arsenal. It is believed to have a very formidable arsenal still of missiles it could use against Israel. As Israeli pressure continues, there might be a feeling of use it or lose it as far as those weapons are concerned. That decision they have to take. And as for the Americans, as you've been hearing, even though Secretary of State Blinken has said there is still room for diplomacy, and he repeated tonight his belief that America's combination of deterrence and diplomacy has staved off a wider Middle East war. The fact is that, as Tom Bateman said, his Israeli allies, America's Israeli allies, are not listening to them. They are pushing ahead, it seems, very strongly.
Jeremy, thank you. All concerns being felt very strongly here in Beirut tonight as rescuers continue to dig through the rubble throughout the evening to look for survivors of what has been the biggest attack, Rita, that Beirut has seen during this phase of the conflict.